On today's show, going to be talking about which matchups in the Western Conference as well as in the finals are best for the Denver Nuggets, and a lot of questions about Nuggets fans worried. Nuggets fans always worried. We'll get to all of that today on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody, and welcome to Locked On Nuggets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and we appreciate you making this your first listen each and every day. This episode of the show is brought to you by, FanDuel. FanDuel Sports, official sports bet partner of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. On today's show, I asked for mailbag questions from the main account, the Locked On account. And I got a bunch, including a lot of very nervous Nuggets fans. I got to say, Nuggets fans are very nervous heading into this playoffs for a team that's the number one seed and has shown almost exclusively positive indicators. I understand it. I know Nug life. I've been a Nuggets fan my whole life. I know how things seem to always work out for the worse. But guess what? That's sports. Only one team wins. Everybody has to take a deep breath and I think kind of get used to the fact that these next couple of weeks, months are going to be stressful, and that you always just hope for the best in sports. Only one team's gonna get it done. 76ers fans are hopeful. Bucks fans are hopeful. Celtics fans are hopeful. Clippers, Lakers, Warriors, Suns, all these teams are helpful. They're all going to be disappointed except for one. So I get it. Take a deep breath. There's still 5 weeks left in the regular season before you have to start to panic and really feel those emotions. But I got to say, some of the questions today, I'm like, my God, people, calm down, take a quick breath. But let's get into them because there's a lot of different things to talk about. Powell says, who are the worst playoff matchups from the East and the West? And then later on, Miroslav asked a similar question in a different order. Rank potential Nuggets' first-round matchups from most to least favorable. So this is kind of the same question. With Miroslav, it was just the first round, but I'll go ahead and go through the entire West and give you my order of who I think would be easiest to toughest. Number one for me is the Utah Jazz. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but even if they do, I mean, Denver can help them out. I've mentioned this a few times, but Denver can help them out by losing the second to last game of the season. We'll see if that ends up mattering. But to me, the Thunder are a team that is very solvable for Denver. They're not going to be able to guard Jokic. Yes, they have Walker Kessler. My guess is he would be in foul trouble a lot against Jokic. And even if not, he's a rookie. There's just too many things that you have to compute when you go up against a guy like him. And we've seen Jokic have his way. They don't have enough, to me, like dynamic offense that they're going to challenge Denver. Denver's going to outscore them, and I think that would be an easy series. If Denver, Utah matched up, I would probably have Denver in 4 or 5. I think it would be that much of an easy one. I think the Thunder are next. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is really good. I think in a playoff series, you're going to sell out to make his life hard and just make him 90% of what he is, and that would probably be enough for Denver to beat him. It's a tough one. I think some people would maybe get nervous for that one because they have the length, they have a great coach. But to me, it's an inexperienced team that I think Denver would be able to game plan for and be very effective against. So Thunder are right there. And then the Blazers, I might even switch Blazers Thunder. The weird thing about the Blazers is Damian Lillard is perfectly designed to score a lot of points against Denver and against Jokic. But we saw last year or 2 years ago, even when he scores 50 plus, Denver still wins. And I think that's what would happen in the series. I think he would go off. I think Denver would guard him better than they did 2 years ago, but he would go off and Denver would probably still win as they just don't have enough talent on that roster to be able to slow Denver down. So those are the easy ones. You get into the middle tier. Right now, the Grizzlies are the easiest of the middle tier in large part because of how banged up they are and how much they're reeling without Ja Morant. I just think that's a team that's going to enter the playoffs in a little bit of chaos. They have players that can beat you. But to me, I think Denver would handle the Grizzlies pretty well. Though another scary thing is how good they are at home. But again, in the playoffs, I think Denver would lock in and be more prepared for that. The Mavericks are next. I don't think the Mavericks could stop Denver. I think Dallas is a sneaky tough one. And the same reasons we always say about like the Lakers are going to be higher on this list than they deserve. But it's you go into the playoffs against LeBron James, who knows anything can happen. It's the same with Luka. And to be honest, it's the same with Kyrie, who I know a lot of people don't like. But Jokic getting switched out onto Kyrie on the perimeter would look as bad as any player that you could put in that circumstance. If you said what player is going to really make him look silly on the perimeter, Kyrie Irving is right there at the top of the list. I still think Denver would win, but I think that's a series that you would not feel great about Denver's defense in that one. The Wolves, I think are the next one on this list. These teams are all kind of similar to me. They're all kind of in the same category. The thing about the Wolves that's concerning, Karl-Anthony Towns hasn't played all year. Who knows if he'll be back? And even if he is, I almost think it would make them weaker. But the ability to put one defender on Jokic and then roam Rudy Gobert is always a little bit tough. I still think Denver would handle the Wolves. That series to me would at best go 6. So I don't think that this one would be particularly contentious, but there's always a weird wild card where it's a team that's so different from everyone else that gives you a little bit of pause. For me, that's them. And then they also have Conley and Gobert, who the Nuggets have played against a lot. I mean, I don't know who that it gives an advantage to, but it would be interesting. And I do think Anthony Edwards I don't know who would guard him. I think he has the potential to have a really good series. The Sacramento Kings are next for me. This is where it gets a little bit more difficult. The Kings are a really good team. I don't want to disrespect them and say that I think that they're just, because they're the 2 seed, and we know how many times people discount a team, like when Denver was in that spot, like, oh yeah, but they're not for a real 2 seed. I think the Kings are really good. They've really figured out their offense. They run Jokic ball as well as the Nuggets do. They do some things. They actually have more built-in actions into their offense. I think their offense is more interesting than Denver's. Jokic is obviously a better fulcrum than Sabonis, as great as he is. But I think the Kings are in some ways more interesting in what they try to do. But at the end of the day, I think Denver is going to be able to get stops more. The Kings, by the way, have an insane clutch time offense. Their clutch time offense is number 1 by a mile, way better than Denver's even. I think in the playoffs, though, Denver's going to be able to get enough stops in the clutch that I think they would win that one. Again, another series that I would probably predict in 5 or 6. And then the Clippers are on this list as well. The Clippers are reeling. I'm not sure they're actually good. I definitely don't think they have a culture that can compete with Denver's. And I also think that matchup is just Denver. If you don't have a pick and roll threat, Westbrook would actually weirdly be more valuable in that series than he would again in most. But I just think that Denver would be able to slow them down enough. And I don't think the Clippers are stopping Denver at all. Denver would put up some absurd numbers in that. So then you go to the 3 teams who are in the top tier of this for me. And the weakest of the 3 to me is the Lakers. And I know a lot of people are saying, Adam, this is your baggage. The Lakers suck. They're 32-34. They have a losing record. Look, all of these things are true. What's also true is that LeBron James is getting a month rest before going into the playoffs. And LeBron, I always liken this back to 2 years ago. Yes, Chris Paul was hurt in the playoffs in the first round. But the Lakers entered that series and got 2 games on the Suns. When nobody else did, by the way, in the West, they got 2 games on the Suns and actually were in control of that series until Anthony Davis went down. They weren't good either that year. They were playing up as a lower seed. But in the playoffs, that LeBron James, Anthony Davis 2-man game looked like LeBron James had in the entire 20 teens. And I think that the Lakers team, again, I would pick Denver to win this series. And I think this Lakers team is too flawed to be the thing that I'm talking about fearing. But LeBron James has just been in that situation more than any other player in the NBA. Any other player. Way more experienced. He's smart, and he does the exact thing that would be challenging for Jokic particularly to guard, which is the pick and roll with a rim rolling threat, and then obviously having to guard LeBron James in space. So to me, that one would be really tough. I would hate it. Part of me wants it because I think the Nuggets are going to have to go through the Lakers at some point in their tenure, and you might as well get it over with. So part of me would welcome it, and I think it would sharpen them and get them ready. But obviously, I think that's a series that Denver could lose. The next one is the Warriors. And I know people will be saying the Warriors got Steph Curry back and are 0-3. They're at the 6th seed, 34-33, barely hanging on. Are they even a good team? And same thing. I think they actually are meaningfully worse than they have been in their championship years, especially when you factor in that they are putting so much together on the fly with Wiggins being gone and who knows what they'll be. But I look at their 5-man lineup and I say it's one lineup that to me is so dangerous. They move the ball so well that I don't think Denver is going to be able to slow them down very much at all. I don't think the Warriors can guard Denver, and I think Denver would score a lot too. But then you're coming down to, do you just get a hot Klay Thompson game? He's had a lot of hot games, by the way, in the last 2 months. Klay Thompson has had these 40, 50, 10 3. I think he has multiple 10 games with 10 or more threes, and they're sort of random. But if you catch one, that might steal a game 1 or 2 just because, Klay Thompson went 10 of 13 from 3 because he couldn't miss that game. So I think the Warriors have the pedigree. They have the style. They don't necessarily have the defense, which is a big part of what they've had in years past. And that's why I think Denver, again, if they matched up with the Warriors, I would pick Denver to win. But I'd be very uncomfortable with that one. And to me, that one would be much more of a 6 or 7. And then, of course, number 1, you hate to say it, but it's the Phoenix Suns. And what's weird about the Suns, I'm not sure the Suns are actually as good as, the sportsbook have and this or that. I think they're vulnerable, but matchup wise, Denver's tough. And I'm curious because Denver, I think, would score on Phoenix actually pretty easily. They play them twice later on in the season. Who knows if KD is back? I'm so curious to see how Denver approaches those games, because one thing I want to see is if you go into Phoenix and they don't have Bridges, they don't have Cam Johnson, do they have enough? And they don't have Jay Crowder, by the way, which is kind of under discussed as well. Another big body you can throw at Jokic in different ways of help and rotations and whatever, rebounds. You don't have those guys. What happens to what goes on with Jokic? Does Jokic go in there and score 20 points in the first quarter just to send a message and say, okay, now we know they can't guard us. They're going to hit a lot of pull-up jumpers. They're going to hit a lot of stuff. We can't guard them. But Jokic is going to go off in that series and completely control it in a way that even Kevin Durant might not be able to match. I don't know. But then you look, the thing that makes you vulnerable to the Suns in particular is Denver really struggles with pick and roll, especially with a ball handler that can pull up off of the dribble. Chris Paul did it to them 2 years ago, or 2 years ago when they swept Denver in the second round. They just went to that pick and roll, got right to that foul line, and Jokic had to either come out and guard it fully and Chris Paul could get around, or it was just exhausting because you were doing it every single game, every single possession, or you drop down and dare them to hit mid-range jumpers. KD's the best mid-range jump shooter, maybe of all time, but certainly of the era right now. Devin Booker is one of the best, and he's on a heater right now. Chris Paul, one of the best all time. So you got three guys who are so perfectly suited to say Jokic is going to have to play that soft drop, and they're just going to elevate over him. And I just don't think Denver is going to stop them, especially in the clutch. So I think that would be an offensive battle. I think you would see some absurd numbers. I think Jokic would probably average 35, 15, and 15. I think Kevin Durant would probably average 40. Devin Booker would probably average 40. I mean, it would be a series where there's like crazy numbers that are thrown out. But it makes me nervous when Denver has a team that they just would not match up well against. So that's my list. Curious what everybody else thinks. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. I think self-discovery is something that everybody should spend time on. Therapy, on the other hand, is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way that we do until we talk things through. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from where you are. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. I like that because oftentimes, finding the right therapist isn't just about their skill. It's about the connection you have. There's certain people that you just sort of vibe with. And that's why I like their policy that if you find one, you say, you know what, they were nice, they were good, but weren't for me. You switch, there's no charge. They're in it for the same thing, trying to find you the right therapist that can work with you. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back with more Locked On Nuggets. Segment 2, Locked On Nuggets podcast. Matt Moore's got the day off. I'm flying solo. I got a question here from Snowden Steiber, who says, given the recent revelation from Vlatko about Jeff Green's intensity and given Jeff's work to get ex-Nets and other role players to Denver, is it possible Jeff is more of a mastermind than we took him for? Did he see Jokic and say, I'm getting my fellas together for a run? Now, it's funny the word you use, mastermind, because I don't look at this as a mastermind type thing. I look at this more as, I don't think we really know that much about Jeff Green. He's played with a lot of famous people, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, LeBron James. I mean, he's been around a lot of this. And I think sometimes by association, you say, oh, well, he's probably like those guys. He's probably into the celebrity life and, this or that or whatever. I mean, who knows what Jeff Green actually is? The one thing I'll say about Vlatko's revelation is it makes sense that he would be this veteran player, and he's seen so many different cultures and styles of play and locker rooms and different things. And then he's here and he's like, yeah, this is special. I like this. And I'm going to let other people know about it. Of course, his friend DeAndre Jordan. But Bruce Brown, I'm sure even too, a little bit of a, hey, this is not a place where there's a lot of games going on, a lot of BS, a lot of politics or whatever. So mastermind, I don't know if I would say that, but this notion that this is really important to Jeff, it makes me hopeful. We talk about who's going to be playing later on the show. We'll talk about the Vlatko, Zeke, Jeff Green. Jeff Green is really good when he plays hard. And I don't think he plays hard very often in a regular season. He's a veteran. But I do have hope, given that he played so well in some of these key games over the last 2 weeks, and given, what Vlatko says about him, I have hope that he's actually going to be a guy that has big games in the playoffs just because he leaves it all out on the court. This might be his last good chance to win a championship. Who knows what his future holds, even with the Nuggets next year. And I'm sure he looks at it that way in some capacity. Mike Wilson asks, if you could go back and find a point guard 2 again at the deadline, would you change who we picked up? Or are you happy with Reggie knowing he still needs to mesh? This one's tough because I went back as I was preparing for this and thinking about this one. I went and looked at all of the candidates, all the people that you think you could pick up. The hard thing is if you didn't pick up a point guard and you lose Bones, I don't think that, you could play Ish, but I don't think you could play him every game. You could just play him spot minutes. So are you really rotating hard to get a secondary, like Jamal Murray's playing even more minutes with the bench? That's probably a negative as well. So I don't think that there is a good solution in this example. I think Denver just didn't have a good option if you're getting rid of Bones of how you were going to handle that. I'm not a fan of Reggie Jackson. Reggie, to me, is a player who becomes the success of that group almost solely depends on the success of Reggie Jackson. And I don't like that because I don't think he's good enough to be that type of guy. Some point guards, you could say, oh, well, the point guard had a bad night, but it was picked up because so-and-so had a good one. I just don't see that happening very often with Reggie in the mix. He's going to make shots like he did in this last one or 2 games ago, and it's going to be the difference for that bench. Or he's not going to make shots, and they might be really bad. So for me, I don't know what I would rather have gone to. The one thing I will say that we know in the Michael Malone era is that if you said Reggie's going to come in and he's got to compete with Christian Brown for minutes, absolutely not the case. You knew he would come in and be penciled in as the guy, and that Christian Brown would really have nothing, to really have no chance to break into it outside of injuries. So for me, I look at it and I think Christian Brown, to me, there's a world in which he becomes such a valuable defensive player that he's in your defensive rotation. Now I don't see that happening at all. And now I look at it and I go, I don't know what the identity is of that second unit. So I'm concerned for the second unit for sure. It might resolve itself by just in the playoffs. Either he has good games and then you just say, whatever, good game is all that matters. Which, by the way, kind of happened with Bones last year. Bones had a great game 4, was it? And Denver won. And you don't have to sit there and say, well, was he good the rest of the time? Like, hey, he had a good game. He shot well, and it went in. Maybe Reggie has a similar impact on him. I do think, and I'm curious, we'll get to a little bit later, I'm curious to see how the rest of the rotation shakes out after him. And I have a feeling that we're going to get a good sample of that over the next 10 games. Joshua says, are we worried at all about some of these injuries, lingering injuries going into the playoffs? AG's shoulder, Jamal's knee and back, etc. Somebody sent me some stats the other day about Jamal's, since he came back from injury, how his efficiency has plummeted. Now, I think some of this is he's had a couple bad games, and with small sample size, 2 bad games really tanks it. 3 bad games, you're hopeless. Because I think he's had some highs that have reminded you a little bit. But as he pointed out, the commenter pointed out, most of that was from hot 3-point shooting, not necessarily from getting to the rim. And of course, we saw him miss a dunk the other day, a tomahawk dunk, which we almost never see him do. So maybe there's something to Jamal could use just a little bit of rest and get healthy. AG's shoulder for sure as well, reaching for it the other day. I think that Denver is going to be smart. I would say that there's 5 weeks is a long time. And I'm curious to see how Denver approaches this road trip. They're on the road right now in San Antonio. They come home on Sunday. Is it Brooklyn that they play on Sunday? I think it's Brooklyn. And then they go on the road for a 5-game road trip. I believe it's 5 games. I'm curious to see how they approach that road trip, because to me, that's where you get healthy. It's almost all, I think it's all Eastern Conference teams. They don't really matter, and you're on the road. That's where I would shut AG down a little bit. That's where maybe even Jamal takes a night or 2 off. They've got a back-to-back in New York. Maybe Jamal only plays one of those. So I'm curious to see how they approach that. But for me, I'm not worried about it. Everybody's banged up. Like Jokic is banged up, has some injuries too that aren't discussed. And they're not injuries. They're just, could he use a week off? Absolutely. I think Denver doesn't want to compromise their position in the West, and I don't think they will. So you want to win just enough of these games so that you can be prepared to rest and then be 100%. At the NBA level, these are pro athletes. It's not like they need a month off. I think a week off, at the right time. And by the way, they'll probably get a week off from the end of the regular season. And then there's the play-in, and then you start your series. So they're probably already going to get a little bit of time off. So I think Denver is going to be fine going into the playoffs from a physical standpoint. And then the alien asks, it's clear that the priority for the Nuggets is figuring out the bench offense. How do we do that? Play them more minutes than normal, keep tweaking lineups, or should we be starting to tighten them up? It's a really good question. So Michael Malone loves to play the starters heavy minutes together, and the staggered lineups are usually not that staggered with like that many bench players. The thing that to me, I think Denver can do that would solve a lot of their problems, especially with Zeke Naji out, Vlahovic out. I don't know why Michael Malone hasn't tried playing Michael Porter Jr. at the 4 more. At the 4, he's so valuable. 1, he rebounds better traditionally as a power forward. 2, he's usually more open because now you're talking about different types of positions and guys having to guard him. I love him as a power forward, and he never plays there. Part of me looks at that lineup. One of the problems, you got Reggie, you got Bruce. Jamal has been out there. Let's leave him off for a second. You've got Jeff Green right now, and you got Thomas Bryant. I don't love the scoring or the defense there. I don't think that you have enough shooting. I don't think that you have enough length. I don't think you have enough of all these pieces. So you look at it and you go, it's not that good on offense. It's not that good on defense. So does it have an identity? If you added Michael Porter there, I don't know what it would be defensively, but I think it would improve the offense a lot. You're starting to give a lot more spacing to that group. And maybe it means taking Jeff out. Maybe it means taking Thomas Bryant out, and then you have him out there. Maybe it's a double stagger and you put Murray and Porter with that second unit. To me, it would work. You don't want to get into a position where you're giving the Jokic minutes are your sledgehammer. You want to win those and win them handedly. So you don't want to take too much talent away from Jokic. But I think we have a big enough sample size now to see that Jokic plays really well with Jeff Green. He plays really well with Bruce Brown. So those, and Christian Brown even, he plays really well with. So I think you can give Jokic more like low usage guys. Tell Jokic he has to ratchet up the intensity a little bit more during those minutes. And then I think that Murray and Porter give enough of an offensive identity to that second unit that it would have something. So I wish Denver would experiment with it. So far they have not. Michael Malone, very rigid and unsurprisingly so in how he approaches those minutes. It's unfortunate. Maybe, though, over this next stretch, we're going to see a little bit of that. I kind of if we don't over the next couple games, then I guess we just never will, and it would be a real loss for the Nuggets. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drain. Threes drain is the most fun one. By the way, tonight, are we betting Murray threes? Is he going to hit a lot of threes tonight? Not a lot? Is he still in his head about it? I would guess he hits a lot, but who knows? Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlays. So don't miss a chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. We'll be right back. All right, finishing up a mailbag podcast here on Friday. Let's get it. Brett Power says there's a huge opportunity for the Nuggets to get out of the Western Conference with this great roster and with all the other teams' injury problems. Can they really do it, or has it been a mirage? We'll find out together, man. This is the plight of the Nuggets. This is really what sports are all about. I mean, I love how much everybody is so into projecting forward. It's fun to talk about, but the real joy of sports is that we all find out together. I mean, I don't think it's fair. I don't think the Nuggets have a history that would allow people to levy some of the claims they have about them. Oh, they're fraudulent, or everybody wants them. Like, I think that stuff is crazy looking backwards. But looking forwards, we don't know how Denver is going to handle a Phoenix Suns. We don't know how they're going to handle a playoffs. We haven't actually seen them fully healthy with the playoffs in a crowd since 2019. It's been a long time. So I think it's fair to have these questions about them, but that's the beauty of sports. What I'll say is, I think Jokic has been in third gear for most of the year, and he's dominated. I think he has another level of seriousness to him. I think Jamal Murray has, at his best, looked very good, but he's been so inconsistent. Now, is that because of injuries? Maybe. But I would love to see a little bit more of that here before the end of it. And if those two guys are firing on all cylinders, everybody else just has to do their job, and Denver is going to be as good as anybody. CU Buff Panama says, wondering if Adam has any info on how the NBA gossip kings, Woj, Shams, managed to get so many scoops league-wide, even over local press that spend more time around the team. I find it fascinating, but don't really understand how the game works. Thanks. Love the show. It's a really fun question. I don't ever know how much people care about the behind the scenes with media and this or that. What I'll say is local media, guys like Mike Singer, as well as us at DNVR, we're very close to the team. very connected to coaches, and front office in particular, but even agents that we talk with somewhat regularly, and then players, obviously, who you have, different relationships with. You know a lot more than what you're able to say. And a lot of this comes down to, there's on the record and off the record. Shams and Woj have so much power because they are information brokers. Not only do they know what's going on with the Denver Nuggets or this or that, they also know what's going on with this agent, with this other team, and everything else. And everything has become an exchange of information. I will give you this, you give me that. Make sure I get this information out, and I'll tell you. And if you notice, one thing you'll notice is that Woj tends to be the guy who breaks stories that come from a team. So if you see a report about what a team is thinking or this or that, not 100, not 1-to-1. There are exceptions, of course, but typically speaking, it's coming from Woj. If you hear something that's coming from a player or an agent from that side of it, typically, and again, not 1-to-1, but typically that's coming from Shams. That's where those guys have really ingrained themselves, and they are in the business of information sharing. Reporters and people like myself, who's more of an analyst than a reporter, I'm in the business of knowing what I'm talking about, having perspective. And sometimes a team will tell you, they'll share you lots of things. I felt confident about Bones's departure from Denver. I kind of just have a feeling that was going to happen from talking to a lot of people. Now, nobody says, hey, this is it, and it's going to be here, and it's going to be this exact thing. But that news was a thing that contextualizes how I covered the team for the weeks leading up to the trade deadline, and rightfully so. Same goes for, this player is making a lot of shots right now, but behind the scenes it's a disruption and the team is not really filling him. I wouldn't be surprised if it factors into the way that you analyze the team and some of the information you give. And it's funny, by the way, because a lot of times some of our biggest things that we get pushback over, fans will be like, I don't know why Wind is saying this, like such BS or whatever. A lot of that we'll see in the comment section comes from like, yeah, but you have to understand there's a context to this as well that can't be spoken or what have you. So Woj and Shams, they break every story by design. The NBA has sort of evolved into this role where you'll notice this too. Shams will break a story. Mike Singer will publish a story on it. Like he'll have it queued up, but not able to fire the bullet because everybody understands that the way you maintain the information that you have is to let the proper channels kind of release the things that the way that they are. Most of the time, 99% of the time, this is not a problem. Meaning it's not a problem in that Woj just breaks this story, Shams, whatever. The story still gets broken. There are times, though, where there have been stories that I couldn't corroborate because it's not on the record. Like I would have no recourse of telling you, hey, somebody told me this in a phone call, but there's no way I could prove to you that this is the thing that's going to happen. That if a story doesn't break, that actually has real life implications or should be broken. Like the public deserves to know this. It's not a rumor. It's not this guy's not playing well. It's, something larger. There are times when I've sat back and thought, why isn't this story out? I'm sitting waiting for this story to come out, and I can't believe it's not out, and something's wrong with it. So 90% of the time, I think this is sports. The way information gets shared, I understand it. I don't have a problem with it, but I do think there are some things in the NBA that don't get reported that I go, man, this is wild. And the people that should be reporting on this, whose job it is to be a reporter, are not reporting on it in a way that is, like, to me, problematic. Michael Shield says, how prepared is Malone for an end-of-season playoff run? Seems like we are in uncharted territories for him. Obviously, he has playoff experience, but not as a true contender. I think the underrated thing about coaching in the NBA is that just like playing, you get better over time. And you can also get worse over time. You can become stale. I mean, we've all seen coaches who have been great coaches who, like, the game has passed them up. They've been slow to evolve to a certain point. I think Michael Malone is still in his ascension as a coach. And more to the point, I think people like David Adelman are still in their ascension as coaches, people who have been through this process and have learned things and are likely to be better this time around than they have been in previous years. Now, are they ready? It's the same thing we'd ask Jokic. He's better now than he was in previous years, but is he ready to outduel Anthony Davis and LeBron James simultaneously, Kevin Durant and Devin Booker simultaneously? Is he ready for that? We don't know. We'll find that out together. I think Michael Malone is prepared because this team has a lot of continuity, and I think that they have fewer questions to answer than most. That being said, the one trait, Michael Malone has some built-in things about his personality, about who he is, that I think have set him up for slow starts and his team's up for slow starts. He's extremely principled. I think in today's NBA, being principled can get you killed in a playoff series. And I think that one of the reasons Denver comes out slow in a lot of series is because Malone likes to, we're going to do this, hell or high water, we're going to do this, and we have to see if they're going to make us change. Where other coaches maybe go in thinking, we're going to throw a curveball. First pitch is a curveball, not a fastball. I think Michael Malone is like, all right, we're going to throw the fastball on one. We're going to test the outside. We're going to test the inside. All right, now we're going to get – no, that's how Michael Malone does. I think some coaches immediately go in there and throw their changeup, throw their knuckleball, and just say, hey, let's read and react and see how they react to that. So I think Malone needs to learn from those prior playoff experiences and be better prepared to adjust on the fly. I always say he makes it to the right adjustment eventually, but usually it's just later than you'd like. If it's too late in this playoff series, eventually it's going to catch up to you. Carlos asks, in your opinion, how much can Joker improve as a rim protector? Is this mostly an effort thing, an athletic thing, or is it Jokic not wanting to risk getting fouls and him getting and him betting that the rewards of him staying on the court outweighs the rewards of being a better rim protector? Good question, good context. Somebody posted the other day online, and amidst all of the race conversation and this or that, somebody posted here are the bottom 9 rim protectors that have contested at least, I don't remember what it was, 2 field goals a game. They were all European or white, all white players. I say this to say there actually is something to, if you lack a certain amount of athletic, so much of rim protection is length and athleticism, that vertical rim protection, which is a big part of defense. It's not all of defense, but it is a big part of it. Jokic lacks a certain amount of athleticism that is always going to make it so that he gets attacked more because teams are less afraid. And that if the team collectively, and him in particular, doesn't do his work early, then he just looks terrible because there's nothing he can do to stop. Like once the train's moving, he can't slow it down. So I think some of this is, he can't handle it. What I'll say is that Jokic, when we talk about being in third gear, he might have been in second gear for most of the year defensively. I think he has more to offer. We've seen good stretches of Jokic defense. We've even seen good games. I mean, that win against the Memphis Grizzlies earlier in the week, that was Jokic playing good defense for a majority, if not all of the game, and just being locked in. I think he's going to be much more locked in on that end of the floor. But whereas maybe 5 years ago, I was hopeful that Jokic could lead a top-off defense. Like, he could be a Marc Gasol-esque type defense. By the way, I think he is. I just think even Marc Gasol would struggle in today's NBA more than he did back then. Jokic has a great quote about how the league is so different from when he first entered that it's barely recognizable as the same. Well, guess what? Marc Gasol's been out the league for, 4 years? I actually think a lot, even a guy like Tim Duncan, who I think is one of the best defensive players from the center position of all time, and he evolved from a changing league. The league he came into in 1999 was so different from the one he won a championship in 2014. And I give him so much credit for being able to adjust. But that being said, the league from 2014 to 2023 continued to evolve in a way that it makes me wonder, how would he step out and guard the perimeter? Would he look more, Brook Lopez has had a huge impact. He's been a great defensive player, although he's got Giannis alongside him and Drew Holiday and a bunch of other of the best defensive players in the entire NBA. But I say all that to say, I don't think Denver is going to shut teams down this year. I think they can slow them down. There'll be some teams that Denver does better against at shutting them down. But I think when they get to the top offenses in the NBA, if they play a Phoenix Suns, I don't think they stop them. You only hope that they slow them enough so that they have a nice cushion going into crunch time, because I trust Denver to score in crunch time, even if another team is going to score right there with them. Let's get to one or two more. Is there a world, and Miss Quill asks, is there a world where Zeke comes back and factors into the playoff rotation at all? There's still some time left, but Bryant has not looked like a playoff viable guy so far. He's looked terrible. In this last game, he kept missing passes and everything. He's so nervous. You can just tell he is like starting to panic. And to be honest with you, that's part of the game. You've got to learn how to overcome these things. And if he can't, it's going to be tough for him. Zeke might not be coming back, so that's part of this. But Vlatko should be back soon. And you have Vlatko, you have Jeff, who to me, I don't think we've seen a ton of those minutes, but at least both of those guys can switch and have a little bit of versatility to them. Do you try that? Do you rest Brian a night and go to that and just say, hey, let's see what this looks like? You also have Aaron Gordon, who can play the center spot. And we've seen them have a huge impact when they took Brian out. Kind of a minor injury, but they took him out. It was almost an excuse to take him out and try Aaron Gordon there, and it worked really well. So does Denver try that again? I think they should. I think Thomas Bryant's best value is in the regular season, not the playoffs. So does he play in the playoffs? Maybe a matchup here or there. But I think Denver needs to seriously start considering getting reps from some of these other front court, off the bench pairings Not just because Brian isn't good or this or that, but even in the playoffs, I just think it's better to be more versatile, more defensive-minded than anything. Somebody asked, have you caught any of Peyton Watson in the G League? I've been super impressed with what he's done on the film in the G League after the disaster at UCLA last year. I haven't. I've talked to some people who are still very optimistic about it. One of the things about the Calvin Booth era, in contrast to the Tim Conley era, and this might be more to do with the Cronkies than it is to do with anything. Sometimes when there's a split and, you lose Tim Conley, and remember, whatever you want to say, I don't think the Cronkies wanted to lose Tim Conley. They lost him and then they moved on. And if you're happy with Booth, great. That's it's great that it worked out that way. I think there's a lot of case to be made that Calvin Booth took over at the exact right time to segue into this next phase, and he's better suited for it. That's a theory that I think I am on board with. One of the differences, though, and I wonder if the Cronkies saw that and not just lost a guy, but lost him because somebody else was willing to pay more in the situation, it's a new ownership group that's actually about winning and is going to do all these things. I do wonder if it lit a fire under the Cronkies in some way, because one thing that I have heard is that both with Kamagate and with Jack White and with Peyton Watson, that the team, and obviously with Colin Gillespie, being hurt and them keeping him close, is that they have an investment in trying to become a great pipeline for the future. And Peyton Watson represents that. So with Kamagate, I know that the Nuggets have people on staff with his team in Paris, so that he's not just getting coached by other people, but that the Denver Nuggets have coaches close to him. And I think with Peyton Watson, it's very similar in that they have a plan for him that started last summer and is going to go all the way up until the start of next season and probably beyond that. But they have a plan of this is exactly what we want. And I think the G League has fallen off a little bit. So a lot of players put up great numbers in the G League. What does it really mean? But I think they're looking at Peyton Watson as something more than just, does he score? Does he rebound? Does he block shots? No, we're trying to develop him in a very specific way. And I'm curious to see. The number one thing I'll tell you is his body to me looks, I haven't seen him in a little bit, but it looks more or less the same. Now he's in a season, he's doing all these different things. That's the thing where I want to see if he has a Zeke Naji-esque first summer, where he just stays in Denver the whole summer. And by the time we see him next year, we're like, my God, that guy went from a boy to a man. He looks big now. He looks like he's ready. And then somebody had a question here about Jack White, and I can't find it. Let me see here, but I'll just talk about him. Oh yeah. What have you seen or heard about Jack White? Will he get a deal next year? I'll end with this one because I think it's interesting. Jack White, if you look at the guys that Calvin Booth has added, Colin Gillespie has good size for a point guard. She's not short by any means. He's added Christian Brown, who's huge for a guard. He's added Peyton Watson, who's got great length for a wing. And Jack White, who has great length and is positionally versatile, and he plays really hard. He's like a really just hard worker. All these guys are known for being hard workers. I think Jack White is not just a guy that was like hey, we'll see what happens. Like if you look at I think Marcus Howard and Jack White show a great contrast between Tim Conley and Calvin Booth, and that Marcus Howard could be Steph Curry or Steph Curry light or something of that nature. But if not, he doesn't fit the mold or philosophy that would make sense. Meaning the B version of Marcus Howard was never going to work for Denver. I think a player like Jack White, the gap between the A, B, and C version of what he could become is so much thinner that you're like, at the end of the day, he plays really hard. He has a high basketball IQ. He has great pedigree coming from Duke and playing with the national team down there. And he's a defensive guy that can be versatile, positionally versatile. I think Jack White might be like PJ Dozier, where he was in the G League for a year, and next year he is in that, he's in the Davon Reed role, but but much more likely to make it as a player, much more likely to be an impact guy. I like what I've seen. His shot was one of the big question marks. It looks like he's really worked on that and become confident in it. And then he just has the length, and I think he's a guy that would be even like a Vlatko Čančar, where you see him in a year or two's time and you're like, wow, that guy really fits in seamlessly. He's a good player. He's a good fit. So I am high on Jack White, even though I haven't really watched a whole lot of his G League tape or any of that stuff. Just based on what I've heard from people, I think that he's a really good dude and has a chance of panning out for the Nuggets as an end of bench guy. But who knows? Maybe down the road, he just, like Vlatko, he breaks into the rotation as an 8th, 9th, or 10th guy. That does it today, guys, for Locked On Nuggets. Matt Moore might be back tomorrow. If not, we'll be back next week with brand new episodes all throughout the week. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.